said he's not giving out numbers. You can't have them until after.
You'll have a special briefing today.
Good morning.
Much better than
Good morning again. A special welcome to our friends from the Senate and the House. Welcome, members of the Cabinet and staff, folks who have been working with Mike and the team for months now on this budget. This isn't the beginning of the budget process. It's certainly not the end. We're kind of in the middle. Historically, it was the case that the governor would make a budget address to the legislature. It's been many years now since we've converted that into a presentation, a public presentation of the budget, and we're basically handing over a proposal, the governor's proposal, to the legislature, and the legislature will start its review of the budget next month and in the weeks ahead, hopefully moving towards a passage of the budget in late June, before June 30th, I'm told. I guess we'll see how that all works out. But I want to first start by thanking all the cabinet secretaries for their work in putting the budget together, for all their staffs, for Secretary Jackson, Director Jackson's team, Mike in particular. If you put your hands together for Mike, he's done a tremendous job. Mike has a great way of kind of figuring out what the priorities are and figuring out how to make them work in a very complicated budget, putting all the pieces together, and hopefully you'll see his work today. As I said in my State of the State address, people ask me all the time how things are going, and my immediate reaction is, compared to what? And on the budget side, compared to when I first took office, where we had about a $350 to $400 million deficit, things are a lot better today than they were then. You'll remember that we had to have a tax policy in order to fill that hole, and the approach to the budget, which we'll talk about at some length in this presentation, is the result of the understanding that that business cycle hasn't changed. And while we have a very strong and robust economy now with very strong revenues, at some point that economy is going to soften with those revenues. The mandatory costs on the expense side are going to outgrow the revenue growth, and we'll be in a similar situation. So fundamentally, this approach starts with that in mind. We all remember how difficult it was to close the $400 million gap with spending cuts that nobody liked to do, and with revenue increases that we didn't like to do either. And so we're putting together a budget today in good times that understands that potential exists in the years ahead, and we don't know when it's coming. Our vision, our priorities are the same: investing in our economy, and it's a more complicated economy in our state than ever before. A new innovation economy, as well as kind of the old industrial sector. You can't have a strong economy without first-class schools. 3 priorities: third grade reading proficiency, middle school math, and making sure every student graduates proficient and ready to go into the workforce productively or on to higher education. You can't have a strong economy without safe and secure communities with a focus on quality of life across our state. Improving the quality and containing costs of health care is going to be a continuing challenge for all of us. It is one of the cost centers that continues to rise at a rate greater than our revenue growth. And so we're always going to be challenged by that. Many of you in this room, and we'll talk about some of those programs. I see Representative Siegfried shaking his head. I've been working with us on how to lower that cost curve so that we can keep up with that, and then running the government in a more efficient and effective way. And all our cabinet secretaries have really leaned into that. Rick Geisenberger leads the GEAR initiative with a constant focus on continuous improvement and efficiency. Here's some of the things that we've done together over the last couple years, investing last year in the largest capital budget in history with investments in in water systems, new roads and bridges, affordable housing. Our colleges and universities in particular are getting focused now because increasingly they're a bigger driver of economic development, both on campus as well as the students that they produce. The $4.5 billion transportation plan to fix roads and bridges statewide, that's the 6-year plan. Secretary Cohen and her team are doing a tremendous job with a really broad distribution of those projects across the state, north to south. $20 million for farmland preservation and open space. The last 2 years, we've been able to make those investments in those important programs. And now our ag-land preservation program, and Secretary Skuse is here, is one of the best in the country. About 25% of farmland is preserved under that program. Significant investment in through opportunity funding in our schools, particularly for low-income and disadvantaged students, mental health supports, which is a priority that we've been working with on members of the House and the Senate. Fostering a healthier Delaware, we're making real progress on training and becoming a more trauma-informed state. Our Lieutenant Governor is providing great leadership through the Behavioral Health Consortium, addressing the opioid epidemic. We still haven't turned the corner yet on that, but we're making progress. We've developed a continuum of care there, I think, that is strong and getting stronger. We've done some things to discourage tobacco use, which will pay off in the long term. And I think the most important thing, and it doesn't get as much coverage as it should, is the reinsurance program that we put in place. Representative Siegfried was the main sponsor. Many of you helped us with that, which is a Medicaid waiver. So we use state and federal funds, and basically to take some of the deep end risk for small businesses through the Affordable Care Act marketplace. And those premiums this year went down 20%. And so enrollment went up 6%. So the people that are going uninsured in our state is declining. It's half of what it was when I was chair of the Healthcare Commission over 10 years ago. And that program in particular is working. We need a lot. We need to do a lot more in that area, and we will continue to do so. Up until this point, the last item working together, we've built, in addition to our 5% rainy day fund, which is a constitutional requirement. We start off the budget with that. We've been able to put together $126 million in a reserve fund that we can use when those revenues soften. We've never used the rainy day fund, and there's reason for that. Take a look at the constitutional language. It contemplates an unanticipated emergency. All of our downturns, we anticipate, we see them coming. DFAC tracks them, the revenue as it falls, and so we've never used that money. Today, that account is $260 million, or 5% of the total revenue, so you can figure it out, do the math. So the focus for this upcoming year's budget is same thing, strengthening our economy. We'll talk about those investments, focusing on our schools and making them better, and quality of life across our state. So in putting together a financial plan, we start differently than in the past. In the past, it was DFAC would give you a number. You'd put 5% away for your rainy day fund. You'd appropriate to the 98% limit, and that was your number. Under Executive Order 21, we establish an operating budget growth rate. It's not based on that high-end revenue projection, and so it's a more moderate growth rate, which gives us extra reserves and extra resources for one-time spending, and will set us up more appropriately for the future. So we have a lot of door openers in terms of the debt service, pension obligation, school population growth. We fully fund the estimate for new students coming next year. A lot of that student population growth is in high needs categories, which is an interesting issue that's developing in our state. And then, of course, our healthcare and medical services in our correctional institutions, and some of the investments in behavioral health. This budget builds on the Opportunity Fund investments with additional focus for mental health services and reading support specialists, again, working with members of the General Assembly in that. And it allocates the surplus to one-time investments in the capital budget. You'll see that making historic investments in clean water, which we've talked about more publicly, in economic development and school construction statewide. School construction's always going to be the biggest number in our capital budget, and it's bigger than it's ever been. And so here's the approach, and it's a little bit different. As I said, usually in the past it started with the two upper blocks here, fully funding the rainy day fund, appropriating 98% limit. We start here now with an estimate that we get from DFAC about what the spending target ought to be. It's based on personal income growth, GDP growth, certain objective criteria. They come back, make a recommendation to us, and that number is a little bit over 4%. And then we put the budget together from that perspective. So what that does, it leaves additional surplus revenues that we can put into the capital budget and one-time expenditures. We'll talk about that, and we'll add to the $126 million surplus for a $161 million reserve, usable reserve, the next time that we have a slowdown. Just a very different approach than what we've taken over the last 40 years. And by the way, that approach has served us well, but it always puts us behind the 8 ball when that strong economy dips down and we're forced to raise taxes and cut spending, and we don't want to do that. So 3 big buckets for spending some of that additional revenue, some of which we've talked about in press conferences that we've had, including this one. We've been working, the total spend for school construction statewide approaches $200 million. $50 million of it is going to the work that we're doing in the Christina schools in the city of Wilmington. Because of the Reading Commission's work, we're not really sure where their schools are going to end up and what district they're going to end up, so it makes sense for us to make this investment. If you remember the last time around, the proposal was to move those schools into red clay, and the school board over there said, we don't want schools that are falling apart, right? And so this will solve that problem. We've gotten lucky because the school in South Wilmington, Palmer, is going to be leased by the ILA and Gulf Tainer, the new operator of the Port of Wilmington. Very exciting thing. The ILA has already signed up, attracted 500 potential new members for the jobs that are coming, and that school will provide a training center for them. We have consolidated the schools on the east side and the west side to Bancroft on the east side, Byard on the west side, converting them into grades 1 through 8 schools, and created an early childhood center and a parent support center at Stubbs. And so there are renovations at Stubbs as well, and building a new school on the east side to replace Bancroft. The next bucket is our economic development bucket. Some of these are programs that already exist, $20 million to replenish the strategic fund. We have an issue, this graduation lab space. We have incubator lab space at both the old experimental station outside of Wilmington, the so-called innovation space there. So we have scientists that are working on their ideas, figuring out ways to commercialize those, but there's not space in Delaware for them to graduate into. And so this money is to incentivize colleges, universities, the private sector to develop that kind of space so that startup companies that are in our innovation lab space at the Star campus or at the experimental station don't graduate to space in Pennsylvania. We want them to start in Delaware, stay in Delaware, and grow in Delaware, and that'll enable us to do it. Secretary Cohen came to us last year with an idea about the Transportation Infrastructure Fund, $10 million. We're already using it. This is for a project. There's a project out there, economic development project. Somebody wants to move into a space. They don't have certain road investments, capital investments that are needed. And they come to a committee that's been set up to access these resources. And a similar idea here, the Site Readiness Fund, $10 million there's a big effort to get ready in 6. If you're going to get ready, meaning ready in 6 months to a year, which is the target that we hear out there, this will enable us to do that and get sites ready to go. And then the last one we've talked about quite a bit, Clean Water Initiative establishes the Clean Water Trust Fund. We worked with the President Pro Tem and Majority Leader in the House, and many of the Townsend Committee, those of you who served on that task, did tremendous work. Rolling all our drinking water, wastewater, drainage projects into a single fund, getting our cabinet agencies to work together, capitalizing that with $50 million, 22.5 for each drinking water and clean water. They both leverage millions of dollars of federal money. You add it all up together, and we start with and you add last year's $25 million, and you've got about $120 million to start with, and that'll take you many years to get those projects. A lot of this money flows south because the communities that are needed the most are kind of some of these hard to service, low-income communities, and particularly in Sussex County, that will become a focus of our work. So that's it for the high level. Mike's going to take you into some of the detail, and then we'll finish it up.
So thank you, Governor. Before I get started, I just want to recognize Senator McDowell, who's standing in the back, who I've worked with for so long in a variety of capacities, as well as Senator Cicola. But I can remember Senator McDowell last year, we had a little goal of being able to have the budget signed by the governor at one of the earliest times in the last 20 years. At least the last 2 years, I think we've had that. So we've tied it for 2 years in a row. I've already checked the calendar. June 23rd would do it, which is a Thursday, of being able to have the budget signed by then. And I'd be happy on Tuesday of the first day of JFC to make the motion to release the budget to help ensure that, if you're willing. If not, we will do our due diligence and go through the process together. Just a couple quick notes. What you have in front of you is really the details behind the numbers on the operating budget, the grants and aid allocation, as well as the bond bill and a one-time supplemental appropriation. As the governor had mentioned, the operating budget is just under 4% at 3.99%. The appropriation benchmark that's established by the DFAC committee in December, as well as revised again in May, was at 4.1%. So just slightly under that. And being able to maintain the grants and aid appropriation, which is funding in our budget that services our fire companies, services our veterans home, services our community organizations, as well as senior centers, remaining at the same level of funding as fiscal year 2020. And then as you can see in the middle of the page is the Bond and Capital Improvements Act at $892.8 million, which is the largest infrastructure plan that's been proposed to a General Assembly. I was sharing with Senator Cicola before this that you, as well as your committee, Representative Ramon and others, have a lot of money to spend, assuming the General Assembly, as well as the Joint Finance Committee, agree on the context of the budget. And we'll detail out really the litany of projects outside of the three areas that the governor highlighted with regard to schools, economic development, and clean water, a number of other initiatives that can be funded, including progress on a new Kent and Sussex County Family Court facilities, which has had robust discussion over the last couple of years and much needed. There is a one-time supplemental appropriation that is primarily geared towards the general election costs, security equipment, technology equipment, as well as establishing what would be called a resiliency fund to help deal with special emergencies that occur throughout the state that Representative Dukes was so active in with respect to the tornado that was happening in Laurel a couple years ago, a resource of being able to address that. So, and as the governor mentioned at the bottom of the page is the level of savings associated with this financial plan. And just as a reminder, a couple years ago we had a budget process with a $400 million deficit and had a challenging time of being able to get through it. And since then have kind of evolved from that with having strategic investments in the operating budget with the leadership of the governor and the support of the Joint Finance Committee of kind of turning the table some and having almost a level of savings that can be used through an act of the General Assembly of $161.5 million. So it is, we are as a state much better positioned than in the past for future economic downturns. Education is across both the operating and the capital budget are significant investments being made. I think you can look across both our capital investments and our operating investments and safely say that of the increase in funding in the operating budget as well as what's being allocated towards infrastructure, schools, K-12 schools make up almost 50% of those investments. And you can see, and we'll detail out a little bit of what the investing in high-need schools means, investing in quality education, and investing in school infrastructure means on the next couple of slides. As the governor had mentioned, this budget does include the second year of a 3-year commitment for $75 million for English learners and low-income students and mental health supports as well as reading supports in what is called the Opportunity Funding Initiative, which was put together in partnership with the Joint Finance Committee based upon the governor's recommendation. I think there is one piece of this that is extremely important, is that not only is the funding available, but there is also an evaluation component to basically better inform how we move forward as a state in being able to address low-income students as well as students that need additional supports to be able to help move through their academic career. And this is an initiative that really starts that process. But the other component of this, outside of the $75 million over the 3 years, is this budget also doubles the number of elementary schools that will receive additional funding for mental health supports as well as reading supports. Currently, there's 44 schools receiving such supports. This budget will take it to a total of 85 schools, which are in the early grades, K-5 schools within our public education system. And then another investment is just increasing access to our pre-kindergarten population through what's called the Early Childhood Assistance Program. It has been quite some time since there has been an increase in the availability of slots available for children and families that are below a certain income level. The current budget includes approximately 850 slots. This will be the first year of funding an additional 155 slots for 1,000 kids to be able to be served, with the goal of increasing that by 50% over the next 3 years, with seed funding available in the budget of $3 million to help build capacity throughout the state that will eventually be transitioned into additional slots and opportunities for families that are deserving of and needing quality care. And then lastly, on education, a couple of areas is just investing in our teachers and our educators and our support personnel. The budget does include a 2% pay increase plus fully funding what are called salary steps. You know, our educators as well as our education support personnel are paid off of their years of experience and their education level. So we fully fund that as well as provide an additional bump over and above just funding mandatory salary changes in their salary scales. Another $500,000 to help grow leadership within our schools through what's called the Governor's Performance Academy by having a cohort of 10 to 15 building level principals and personnel to be able to kind of increase the pipeline of those who are leaders in our school buildings, and additional support for transitioning to the updates to the Delaware Performance Appraisal system, where the upcoming budget year will be the first year of that. There'll be another allocation in future budget years to fully implement the system itself. Investing in our school buildings, you'll see $36.5 million for current year growth and projected school year growth. What that basically means is it's additional teachers in the classroom. It's additional teachers, it's additional operating support, simply to keep pace with enrollment changes, not only for a forecast for the next year, but also for the year in which we are operating. And it also includes additional transportation funding to be able to deal with enrollment growth and new kids in the classroom. I think the takeaway from that really is we have a $4.6 billion budget. That's almost 1% of the budget itself. Just changes in school enrollment and being able to keep pace with having teachers in the classroom to meet our class size requirements and to meet how we fund our schools. Really, before we begin the budget, that is one of the areas that we know that we're going to have to fund in order to keep pace with changes that are happening, not just in our school population, but also just development throughout the state. And then lastly, connecting our schools, almost $5 million set aside for school-level technology infrastructure, where the majority of that will go towards upgrading capacity in our school buildings to be able to utilize the technology that is existing today in our classrooms, whether they're Chromebooks, whether they're iPads, whether they're smart boards. It's been quite some time since all of the building level technology has been upgraded statewide. And what this funding will do is leverage another $8 million of federal funds to be able to help with those upgrades and really complements the investments that have been made the last 2 years by the Bond Bill Committee with the implementation of the Department of Technology and Information of upgrading capacity to the school building. So it's really a multi-year effort to be able to continue to use and expand technology in our schools. School construction and renovation, what this really represents is that there is a lot of school construction occurring throughout the state. The budget in front of you includes $184 million worth of construction spread throughout Newcastle County, Kent County, as well as Sussex County. And outside of the Wilmington Education Initiatives funding that's proposed and the governor had detailed, what the budget will propose is fully funding schools that already have an existing construction program in place. Now, there may be a few changes as we move through the springtime with regard to other districts that have capital construction plans being considered, but at this point, approximately 60% of the funding will be allocated towards Newcastle County based upon their capital improvement plans, and another 40% to both Kent and Sussex. In higher education, within the capital infrastructure plan, there's $50 million that is proposed that is spread across two buckets. One is $30 million that's consistent with prior years, where each of our institutions of higher education receive at least $10 million simply for facilities renewal and renovation, which is consistent with Senate Bill 50 that was passed last year, outlining the intent to be able to fund at least one of our state's institution at a minimum level. And what this does is accomplish it across all three. And then another recommendation to be able to recapitalize the Higher Education Economic Development Infrastructure Fund, which has been used in the past to be able to foster construction programs and renovations that grow jobs, as well as economic development throughout the state across all of our campuses. And then just some highlights on the operating side for each of the institutions. There's funding set aside to be able to expand the University of Delaware Scholarship Program to not only change the thresholds under which a student would be eligible for aid, but to also begin to use those funds to accept students that may have chosen to go out of state but are transferring back into state at the University of Delaware. And under the current kind of rules, they don't transfer students wouldn't be eligible for funding, and this helps us begin to transition to that. Fully funding as one piece of the recommendation for Delaware State University, their land grant match at a dollar-for-dollar ratio at 100%, which is an important part of the work that they do, among other requests that are funded for the Delaware State University, and then Delaware Tech receiving an allocation of funds set aside as a first phase of a compensation plan to put them in a better position long-term when recruiting faculty and other education personnel across all of their campuses. There is a proposal outlined in the budget for a 2% across-the-board increase for all state employees, including education personnel as well as state agency personnel. This is the third year that a compensation proposal has been proposed by the governor, and the General Assembly and specifically the Joint Finance Committee has supported. We've had a lot of discussion and a lot of progress really on the lower end of the pay scale over the last couple of years, and what this does is to try to create a level of uniformity across the pay plan to be able to address all of our state employees, with continued support for paid parental leave, where almost 200 state workers are utilizing such benefit. And then consistent with years past, investing in state facilities, with the largest being providing additional funding to make progress on the Kent and Sussex Family Court facilities, combined with funding that's been previously appropriated and supported through the Bond Bill Committee. There'll be approximately $35 million available to make significant progress in design, establishing a construction timeline, as well as future funding requests to be able to upgrade both facilities that are much needed in both Kent and Sussex. Defer maintenance for state buildings, not just in buildings that are managed by our Division of Facilities Management, but also within the Department of State, all of the facilities that are used by people, not just there, but also in our state parks. An initial round of funding to be able to renovate a building on the Children's Department's campus in Wilmington, to be able to convert that building into usable space and bring people out of leased space. And then lastly, continued improvements at the Carville State Office Building, where we are in the process of renovating a floor-by-floor redesign in addition to the lobby that's already been recently completed. And the next 4 slides were really, there's a lot of numbers on the next 4 slides that really outline the significant level of investments that are being made across the state with an infrastructure plan that was mentioned as being the largest in the state's history. We've discussed improving schools for all Delaware children with school construction and renovation. There is $15 million set aside for deferred maintenance for school districts, which they have the ability to be able to match, as well as, and I had previously mentioned, the campus improvements for higher education. Investing in small business and infrastructure, the governor touched on $50 million being set aside to be able to plan for the future in a variety of areas, and you'll see those highlighted here. Building strong communities across the state within housing, historical and recreational sites within the Department of State, as well as natural resources across all of our state parks. Investments in libraries and a one-time increase to municipal street aid to be able to continue to build on the progress that has been made in the past of being able to not only invest in our downtowns, but also being able to strengthen them in very specific areas. And the protecting natural resources for future generations, the governor had touched on the Clean Water Trust, but be remiss to say, and I saw Senator Wilson here, that farmland preservation being funded and requested at a 3rd year in a row of $10 million, which is fully funded, as well as open space preservation for the 3rd year in a row of being fully funded, with additional support for beach preservation, which will be leveraged with federal funds and primarily resourced and utilized down in the beach areas in Sussex County. And the Cover Crop program, which is another program that is in place to be able to help foster clean water, and then a conservation cost share in Delaware Bayshore. So you'll be able to see that outside of the initiatives that the governor had highlighted, there's a number of infrastructure investments throughout the state. I think we have one more slide with that. The investments that are going to occur within our state buildings, almost $50 million worth of minor capital improvements and deferred maintenance, whether that's in the Department of Correction, Facilities Management, Health and Social Services, the Kids Department, our Department of State facilities, a number of them throughout the state, with being able to continue to make progress, as well as a variety of projects within the Herman Holloway campus, most importantly electrical upgrades and improvements at the state's Veterans Home. And then lastly, safe and stable, can we go back? There we go. The safe and stable communities, I touched base on the Kent and Sussex Family Court facilities, but public safety communications is really the continued commitment we have to upgrading our 800 megahertz system, but that is also inclusive of the 2nd year of funding to be able to put towards upgrading our first responder radios for them to be able to fully utilize the 800 megahertz system once it's upgraded, and then the security camera initiative, as well as sprinklers at the Vaughn Correctional Center. So there is a number of initiatives across, some of which are new and enhanced investments, and some of those are staples that we've had in our capital budget over the last couple of years that Senator Sokola and other bond bill members have recognized the importance of and have supported. So with that, simply a wrap up of the numbers before I turn it over to the governor. I think the takeaways are you have a budget that is less than the appropriation benchmark at 3.99%, the largest infrastructure plan proposed in the state that will allow a number of significant investments across a number of areas, whether it's schools, economic development, economic infrastructure, libraries, state buildings, and whatnot, as well as being able to set aside almost 3% of our budget in a savings account to be able to better plan for the future. So, Governor?
Thank you, Michael. Put your hands together for Mike. That was amazing. A lot of work goes into that. A lot of people, cabinet secretaries and folks. Here's the schedule. You know this. We started back in July. This is our governor's proposed the recommended budget for next year. Now we'll start the JFC hearings, the bond bill committee hearings, and markup coming later in the spring. And I heard Mike throw out a challenge of June 23rd. I don't know whether I didn't hear much of a response to that, but June 23rd sounds like, there we go. We get a little bit of a response to that. Sounds like a good target to get. Let me just wrap up by saying that when you have a strong and growing economy, it makes it easier to put together a budget. We ought to be smart about this budget, though, and think about setting ourselves up appropriately for the future. Use it as an opportunity to make investments in our economic infrastructure, in higher ed and public ed, to take our state to the next level, but to be smart about not going too far so that we set ourselves up for a more difficult time in the future. I want to end by thanking Mike and his team again for their great work, and we look forward to working with all of you. God bless you. Have a good day.